Welcome into the Still Curtain podcast. I'm Josh Yourish, and it's 23 days until the Steelers report to training camp in Latrobe. With that in mind and the lack of NFL news at this time of year, I figured we'd branch out a little bit into the division and reach out to the rest of the AFC North to get the perspective from the top of the division today. So it's time to welcome on sports anchor and reporter for 98 Rock in Baltimore, and most importantly, graduate of George Mason University, Valerie Preactor. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. This is exciting.
Yeah, of course. And first, we got to start a little bit George Mason.
Yeah.
What do you think about the rebrand? What do you think about the new logo? Because there's mixed reactions, not so mixed, a lot of negative.
Yeah, honestly, I have seen a lot of negative about the rebrand, and I haven't really paid too much attention to it, but it definitely is very different. And I've seen a couple other big school brands change, and they've all been negative too. So I don't know if it's just like they're trying to modernize and everybody likes the traditional. But this also isn't the first time that George Mason has changed their logo. So I feel like we've gone through a couple different eras or iterations of it. But I have to really look deeper into it. Since I don't see it all the time now, it probably doesn't affect me as much as like the current students. But I feel like if I was there, I would have a better opinion about it.
I'm fine getting rid of the Star Bowl. I like reintroducing the GM. I have the Mason hat on. This is one we were just, everything was Mason. Now they're going back to George Mason, which I'm okay with including both. But I'm not sure I love the new GM.
Because you're not going to just call it GM. It's not GM.
No, it's Mason. Yeah,
it's Mason. It's GMU. That's it. So, I don't know.
We'll see how it goes. And now, obviously, the topic at hand, the Baltimore Ravens. When we're talking about the AFC North, it's probably the toughest division in football. Mm-hmm. The Ravens are sitting at the top of it with a 2-time MVP. Still not as much playoff success, which a Steelers fan likes to bring up. But we'll start with, who do the Ravens see as the biggest threat in the AFC North? Because I feel like it can't be the Steelers.
See, I would disagree with you there.
Okay.
For at least the most recent years, I feel like the Steelers have had the Ravens number for the most absurd reason. I don't know why, but every time the Ravens – they go into, it's not Heinz Field anymore, but it's Heinz Field.
It's Heinz Field.
There's that energy, and for some reason, they just can't get it done. And it seems like every single time we play this year, it is a hard-nosed, fought battle every single time, but the Ravens never come out on top. And that's what we've seen the last at least 3 years that I've been covering them. I can't tell you if they've won one game. I feel like the last 2 years, the Steelers have swept, and I'm like, what's going on?
Well, there's also a lot of Tyler Huntley games mixed in there that are helpful for the Steelers' cause.
Now, that's fair. And I will say, again, that was the last week of this past season, right, where it was the end of the season. We don't need to see Lamar Jackson. But that's a game that Tyler Huntley should have won. And so there you see an opportunity for him, and where he ended up going in free agency to Cleveland, where he could have probably gone to a better team if he had won that game.
Yeah,
it's a rain game. We're going to toss it, but still, why? I don't know.
So we brought up Lamar Jackson. We brought up the struggles against the Steelers. We'll just jump right into that. I have some other places I kind of want to go. We got to get right into Lamar. Coming off of his second MVP, like I mentioned, the huge contract is kicking in. It's going to be about $32.4 million cap hit this year. He's 2-5 in the playoffs. Like you mentioned, 2-4 against the Steelers. For some reason, the Mike Tomlin defense has his number. And the question I was going to ask is that a talking point in Baltimore the way it is in Pittsburgh? Because it's something we bring up all the time, that Lamar can't be the Steelers. You seem to reveal that it is.
It definitely is, because when you look at Lamar's history, especially against the AFC North, I feel like maybe when he first got here, that rivalry too was still very much at the forefront. And I feel like we've ushered in a new era of the Ravens Steelers. Now it involves TJ Watt and Lamar Jackson, where in past years it was Troy Polamalu, it was Joe Flacco versus Ben Roethlisberger. You know, it was very different. a lot more physical too when you add Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, and those legendary Ed Reed Ravens. I mean, it's much different now. And maybe when we look at going into 2024, it could even look that much different with how much the Steelers roster has changed too. So it's totally different. But the Ravens, I think, just really have struggled against the rivalry that now is just Mike Tomlin versus Coach Harbaugh. Yeah. So congratulations to Mike Tomlin for continuing his stay in Pittsburgh. Obviously, he's an incredible coach. And when you look at that matchup, these are the top two coaches in the league, at least with longevity, in their respective positions in their teams. So I think that's the level that we're looking at it right now, because you can't compare Kenny Pickett to Lamar Jackson or Mitch Trubisky to Lamar. It's not, there's no rivalry there.
No.
So, but the fact that Lamar Jackson's up against those quarterbacks and still can't win is a little questionable. But I also think it's the hype of the game that sometimes I feel like can get to them a little bit. But at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson's talents, the way that you're saying he's a 2-time MVP, he's putting up all these rushing numbers, he can't do the game himself. And we've seen that they didn't do well in the AFC Championship game with him throwing and catching the ball. It doesn't work. Yeah. So Lamar Jackson, I think, needs to take this next step in 2024, utilize the guys around him, which we did see last year, and that's a Todd Monken thing with the offensive coordinator. But I think when you put Lamar Jackson up against the rest of the AFC North, it's not a problem. But for some
it's not
reason,
really a question.
For some reason, they are very much plagued by the Steelers.
Hey, Steelers fans, DraftKings is offering a fantastic sign-up bonus for new users. New customers can place a $5 first bet on any sport to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets when you sign up with our code FSBETS. The best part is that you will receive your rewards even if your first bet loses. Using our code FSBETS not only gets you these bonuses, but it also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code FSBETS to maximize your first bets. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. So with Lamar getting onto that big contract extension, because it felt like just a couple off seasons ago, they were daring other teams to give Lamar an offer, and obviously there are different machinations to how the restricted free agency process works and whatnot. But other teams could have had Lamar Jackson if they threw a Godfather offer at him, and the Ravens were unwilling to do that. So they took that chance, and now they're committed to him on this extension. He responds with the MVP year. How does Baltimore feel about Lamar Jackson? Does the city, do the fan base, and do you specifically believe that he's somebody that can get over the hump and win not just more AFC North titles, but a Super Bowl?
Well, this year we already saw a lot of progression, especially with that first year post-contract for Lamar Jackson. There's no more talk. There's no more mindless noise going on behind him throughout the season. No other conversations about that. So he did shut that down for a bit, because you see him go on this great run in the 2023 season, and they do make it to the playoffs, and they win in the playoffs handily in the divisional round against the Texans, which, we kind of expected that, but the Houston Texans are going to be a dog this year. So for them to then reach the AFC Championship game, that was the goal. So they did reach the goal. The problem is they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, and that's always on their minds, no matter what their team looks like. And they've played with really unhealthy teams when you look at it. And so last year, Lamar Jackson had his health on his side. That's another win for the Ravens. So for him to make it that far in the season, and then to end up being the MVP, which we sort of knew like halfway through. So
it also just became Lamar and nobody else.
Exactly. That was also a given. Like, nobody was reaching the status that Lamar was at. Even Patrick Mahomes, which I think is wild because he ended up winning, Super Bowl MVP. But I think the Ravens fans are content with how, what they reached last year. But obviously there's still unfinished business. And the fact is, yes, you have to be able to win against your division, but you also have to be able to win against your conference. And so I think it really hurt them that they hadn't seen the Chiefs throughout that entire season. Like, they had seen the Texans week 1.
Yeah.
So even though it was a completely different team, by the divisional round, they had still seen them. And so I think that's what really hurt the Ravens when the AFC Championship rolled around, is that if they had seen the Chiefs, even when they were bad in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, where the Chiefs weren't playing up to par, that still would have helped the Ravens.
Yeah, you still have that confidence. You still have that familiarity going into that game. So you mentioned Lamar's health, and that's a big topic because pretty much when he stays healthy, he's either the MVP or in the conversation. And then there are years where he's unable to. Coming into the offseason this year, there are reports that he's down about 20 pounds and trying to add more speed again. Do you like that move for Lamar to trim down and be a little quicker Lamar again?
I'm glad you brought this up because this is something that we've been talking about. I feel like it's been Weight Watchers all off season. So that's the number one conversation about Lamar Jackson. And it was interesting because it was the exact opposite the year or two prior when he did put on, he was about 230 pounds and we could see him bulking up and we're like, whoa, he's ready. He's going to have a cannon. And he does. Yeah. But now that he's slimmed down, I don't think that this past year we obviously still saw him run a lot, which is what he does. I don't think we're going to see him run more or less this year. I still think it's going to be kind of up to interpretation when he feels the need, and they're going to have design runs for him. But I like that he has shed 20 pounds because when you look back at the highlights from like Lamar Jackson, the 2019 MVP, he's slick. I mean, he is a sneaky quarterback. And I think that's what you need from Lamar because he keeps trying to reinvent himself, sticking to what he knows best, which is rushing. And could this be the season where he doesn't rush as much? Because now they have Derrick Henry, which is going to be another topic that we get to. But Lamar Jackson has led the Ravens in rushing for the past several years. He doesn't have to do that because he's the quarterback. But I think him getting on the leaner side is only going to help him, at least in the run game. What I think a lot of other people are worried about is that having that bulk helps you stay less injury prone. Because you can take those hits when you're a little bit bulkier. I still think he's able to elude those tackles, so I'm not really worried about that. But there's always a question of health when it comes to Lamar.
That's a good point, and something I hadn't considered, because when I heard Lamar trim down, I was like, well, we play the Ravens in the back half of the season. We may not even see Lamar again because that's been the story for many years. But you bring up a good point in the reinvention, the constant reinvention of Lamar. He was this run first guy in these, old Greg Roman offenses. Yeah. And now you bring in Todd Monken and you introduce more of a wide open downfield passing game, which worked wonders. And is Slim Lamar with Todd Monken the perfect meshing of both of those offenses where you get the dynamism with his legs and you get the downfield passing? That's an interesting thing to bring up. And you mentioned Derrick Henry, and we'll go there because the Ravens had kind of an interesting offseason. They lost some guys from the defense. They lost Mike McDonald. Henry seems to be the big addition, but he's a downhill running back that's not going to play as a sidecar in the shotgun or hasn't done that as effectively throughout his career. How is that offense going to look with Henry as the primary running back?
Well, first of all, the Ravens did go through a lot of change, and I want to get to that first because that is there was so much change in that first week post the AFC Championship game that was something I asked to Eric DaCosta and John Harbaugh when they had their season review meeting. I'm like, are you guys okay? Like, there's been so much change with, you said it, Mike McDonald. They lost a lot of different coaches behind the scenes too with the promotion of Zach Orr to DC. Like, so much change. Then all the players started to go. And you're like, how are they building this organization back up? And so Derrick Henry was that move that kind of settled the fans. And we're like, all right, things are actually going to be fine because they brought in this big this is a huge splash. To grab Derrick Henry and not have other teams really put in an offer. And I don't think that they're overpaying Derrick Henry with what they have contract-wise, but the fact that no other team really was interested in him at that level, there were talks about him going to the Cowboys maybe, but for the Ravens to pull this out, and again, the Ravens is a destination because of Lamar Jackson, especially for not only offensive position players, but defensive guys don't want to play against him anymore. So they want to be on his team so that they can avoid that. So for Derrick Henry to be interested enough to come to the Ravens, sign here, seems happy to be in purple and black, and he's a workhorse. And so Todd Monken has already said, he should lead the team in carries. That's their expectation. He's going to be their go-to running back. And the Ravens haven't really had that in the past couple of years. They used to do sort of a platoon job between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbin. Both of those now going to L.A. with the Chargers to join Jim Harbaugh, the other Harbaugh brother, we like to say. So there's been a far departure from what the rushing attack looked like for the Ravens and what it's going to look like now, because Derrick Henry, he's the beast, and he is an absolute monster when you look at him. And the fact that he's led the league in rushing for the last however many years, it's going to get even better when you combine him with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and that's something definitely to worry about, because in the past, I feel like something the Steelers have had success with defending Lamar is kind of trying to take away his legs as much as possible. Yeah. There are so many times TJ Watt is practically tackling Lamar even when he is handing it off on that zone read. And we've seen that for years. And now when you have to worry about, you need multiple bodies to tackle Derrick Henry. It's not a one-man job to bring that guy down. That's going to help in the numbers game for Lamar. So it definitely makes them a much scarier team. On the defensive side, you talked about all the changes. Mm-hmm. Just go wherever you need to go with losing Mike Macdonald, because from the outside looking in, it seems like a huge loss because that defense is so innovative. And I cover college sports a lot as a writer. That Michigan defense is terrifying with the simulated pressures, and it just confounds opposing quarterbacks. What kind of loss is that, and how do you feel like they're able to replace him?
We did know that going into the end of the season, Todd Monken, even in his first year, and Mike Macdonald were both going to be huge candidates for head coaches around the league. I mean, with how many head coach openings there were, 2 vacancies by the end of the season, we were like, oh my gosh, if we lose both of these guys in the same year, that's huge. And that would be a massive loss for the Ravens. So luckily they did hold on to Todd Monken. And I think it just makes sense that he'd want to stick here for more than 1 year, because yes, they did get to the AFC Championship game, but obviously Todd Monken, coming off of 2 NCAA championships, like, he's going to want to get that Super Bowl ring too.
Yeah.
So I think he's got unfinished business, and you can't just work 1 year with Lamar Jackson. Like I said, he's reinventing himself. Things change all the time. So I think this is going to be an exciting year for Todd Monken in the offense. But for Mike Macdonald to move on to Seattle, which, first of all, it's just a huge change for him. I feel like it's like every couple years he's going somewhere else. So that's a lot of change. But the Ravens defense is really resilient, and they did have a lot of guys move. Obviously, they don't have Jadeveon Clowney back, who had an impressive year last year, an incredible career year, 9.5 sacks, along with Kyle Van Noy, who is coming back, an incredible guy on and off the field. Again, 9.5 sacks, like a career year for those two. That's what the Ravens do. They bring in these veteran guys that for some reason have the best years. Yeah. So for them to lose Jadeveon Clowney, it's a big deal. We're going to see if other guys are going to step up. Is Odafe Oweh going to become that guy? Is David Ojabo going to stop getting hurt and be that guy? Because they also lost Patrick Queen, who, hand in hand with Roquan Smith, the best inside linebacker duo in the league. He went to the Steelers, obviously.
Yeah.
Big deal. So I think that they're hoping a lot of those younger guys step up. You're going to see Trenton Simpson probably fill that gap with Roquan Smith. And the fact that he's now going to be a second year, he's not a rookie anymore. He's already grown and learned from Roquan Smith that 1 year. And Roquan Smith is the catalyst of this defense. He is the Ray Lewis. He brings that juice. That's what Lamar said about him. So I don't think it's that much of a change, especially when promoting Zach Orr from within. I think it's the smartest move the Ravens could have done, because you don't have to teach him the Ravens way. He already knows it. He's been a player. He had to retire early. He had football taken away from him unexpectedly, and then went into coaching and has really just taken to that like a duck to water. So the fact that he gets to stay here with his team, and it's going to be different for him calling plays, obviously. We don't really know how that's going to go the first couple of weeks. But since he's been with the team as it is already, I think they are really accepting of him, and they're very excited for him to take on this new role. And I think it's just going to be business as usual going into 2024. I'm interested to see if they're going to grab any other additions before, the start of the season. Like Kyle Van Noy was a really late ad, even into the season. He was off the couch. So you never know what moves they're going to make, and I leave that all up to Eric DeCosta. He does a great job with that. So as is, I think we should be fine. And with who they've added, also with the draft, I mean, Nate Wiggins going right in there for the secondary, it's going to be monstrous.
Talking about the defense and the continuity is a huge thing. I talked about the Steelers and obviously this offseason about how they build up this roster. And I feel like the Ravens do a much better job because they're both kind of base 3-4 teams, whatever that means anymore. Everyone plays sub packages, but the Ravens have historically blitzed a lot.
Yeah.
So they've not spent as much on edge rushers, on defensive linemen. They've spent in the secondary. So you can, allow more rushers at the quarterback, and you trust your corners to stay, in man-to-man coverage, whatever, in zone. And the Steelers kind of do the opposite. They blitz a lot and they pay a lot for their edge rushers, and it's kind of redundant in that way. So that's why I always look at the Baltimore defense with a lot of reverence, because they can cycle in anyone on the defensive line, and it has success because they blitz so much and they have such great teachers on that coaching staff. You mentioned Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen before Roquan Smith got there, not the same Patrick Queen after. Do you think the growth was real and will stay in Pittsburgh when he's, the number one inside linebacker, or will he regress a little bit to what he was before Roquan showed up in Baltimore? I've
had this thought a lot too, because going into his third year, that was supposed to be like his really explosive year. His dad had said that he had a really explosive year, his third year in high school, third year in college. We were like, okay, third year in pro, he's going to be like insane. And that was halfway through the season when they grabbed Roquan Smith. So obviously his play got better when Roquan got there, but I think that's a coincidence. To me, yes, he needed that technically veteran guy, even though Roquan Smith, I guess he's been in the league a lot longer, but not too much longer than Patrick.
Still a young player.
Exactly. So, he's not a Jadeveon Clowney. He's not like almost 35, 40 years old, something like that. But I think for Patrick Queen, he needed that. And I still feel like he needs a partner on the inside to help him get there. So it does. And that's why I feel like a lot of Ravens fans were totally fine with the Ravens not picking up his fifth-year option. They were
that scares me to death.
They were like, we don't need him. Trenton Simpson, perfect. And I'm like, oh, I haven't seen enough from Trenton Simpson. I saw one game against the Steelers, but you know what? If everybody else thinks Trenton Simpson's a great guy. But I think the duo of Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, that is lethal. When you separate them, I'm not sure what it's going to look like for Patrick Queen. We know that Roquan Smith is that beast. He created that. So I think for him, that's why everyone's comfortable, because we know that he's going to teach Trenton Simpson the same thing. Is Trenton Simpson going to be at that level that Patrick Queen was 3 years in? I don't know. He's only in his second year, so we'll have to see. But if Patrick Queen does have that other guy to go to, I think he could be very successful, but I can't confidently say he's going to have a career year on his own.
Yeah, see, that scares me a lot. And that's kind of the way I feel about it too, because there was so much talk when Roquan Smith got there that this is freeing Patrick Queen up to play more downhill. He doesn't have to worry as much about coverage responsibilities and getting everyone in the right place on defense. He's going to mostly have to be that guy for the Steelers. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick's behind him, who's a veteran and knows how to run that unit as well, but he can't just be flying downhill like he was in the best version of himself in Baltimore. And that scares me to hear you say that Ravens fans and a lot of people in the Ravens media were like, that's okay, let him go to Pittsburgh. That's a scary feeling.
But these guys also want to chase the money. So could he, if the Ravens had offered him something, obviously not that he was, I guess, a free agent, but these guys want to get paid. They want to make generational money wherever they can go. And when you look at it too, the standard on another team is so different than the standard in Baltimore. So I think for those guys, you look at a Patrick Queen, a Geno Stone, they're mid. They're average guys. Did they look really good with the Ravens? Yes, because this is an above average team that has such high ceilings every single year. So did they reach that? Absolutely. Is that the expectation at every other team? I can't say that. I can't say that it is. So I think for them, are they going to be above average elsewhere? They totally could be. But they're also, again, it's all about the money. And that's the conversation that we had, during free agency when people were going left and right. Yeah. Because, back in the day, and we've talked about it a lot, with Tom Brady, keeping a team together so that everybody gets paid. Because everybody wants to get paid, but they're going to go wherever they need to get it.
Yeah.
So then you kind of break the team up, and that's why you can't have a dynasty all the time.
So do you feel comfortable with how Baltimore's going to be able to build with Lamar now being one of the most expensive quarterbacks in the league?
It's a good question because I think that's why they end up going for those cheaper veteran players. Luckily, they have success with them. I think it's a lot of time luck, but that's the eye that Eric DeCosta has because he can see that this guy still's got a lot of gas left in the tank. Like a Derrick Henry. Maybe that's why a lot of other teams didn't want him because he's, on the cusp of 30 and, you don't want to get on the wrong side of that. So I think that's what the culture is in the Ravens locker room, at least, is that every guy here has a lot of potential, whether they're a rookie or they've been in the league for 10 years. And so for some reason, they make it work. But it's a scrappy team. Yeah. Like, they're not paying every single person, the max amount of money that they could because they're paying Lamar a lot of money. So I think then you got to cut corners. You got to not necessarily suffer in another area, but you do definitely just have to kind of count your pennies in some positions.
So we brought up Lamar again. Rank the quarterbacks, the starting quarterbacks in the AFC North, 1 through 4.
See, so I have to put Lamar first.
Yeah.
Put Lamar first. Then I say Joe Burrow. When you have a healthy Joe Burrow, especially with the talent that he has around him, and I know it's not the three-headed monster that it's been. I think that's changed. But if Jamar Chase is still there, that connection, it's undeniable. So I think Joe Burrow, a healthy Joe Burrow up there, we've seen them go to the Super Bowl. I have every faith in the Bengals. They're a good team. I mean, from what we've seen from Russell Wilson after the last couple of years in Denver, I don't want to put Deshaun Watson third, but everybody seems to think that he is a really good quarterback. I haven't seen enough of him yet, especially with this last year, him being not healthy and very injured and obviously not interested in helping the rest of the team. It's really a tough go for third and fourth, to be honest. I mean,
I'm not somebody, so I'll say I liked Deshaun in Houston, but it's been a long time since we've seen him play. Yeah. He has not been the same quarterback since everything that happened, and we don't have to get into all of that. Obviously reprehensible. I'm not a Russell Wilson believer either. So I'm not somebody who's like, well, maybe Russell Wilson, he's won a Super Bowl, he should be in that conversation. No. Well, I don't feel good about either of those guys, and that's why I was interested about where you'd rank them.
I'll give you one. Justin Fields, number 3.
I'm into that.
I am a huge Justin Fields fan. I think he is such a talented quarterback that has been in such a horrible organization for too long. That is where quarterbacks go to die. So I feel really bad for Caleb Williams. I hope that his talent shines through there. I hope that they figure that out because these quarterbacks that they have picked are very good. Justin Fields is the reincarnation of Lamar Jackson. I think he aspires to be Lamar, and if they put him in the right system, it would work. But they haven't done that yet. They haven't given him the pieces. They've only taken them away from him. So not that I think the Steelers really have the right pieces for Justin Fields, but I think he can flourish if they want him to.
I'm a Justin Fields guy. I want to see Justin Fields starting by week 4 or 5. I mean, I would want to see him starting by week 1. I had no interest in bringing Russ here. I'm okay with it for the cost because maybe you get something out of it. There's no risk at all. But I'm a Fields guy too.
So I would put him number 3, and then Russell Wilson and Deshaun are tied for 4th. We'll go with that.
I like that. I like that a lot. And then finally, we'll go here. Who wins the AFC North? And if you can give me, because it's probably the toughest division to do it for, if you could give me 1 through 4 for the teams and where they finish.
Honestly, okay. So I never want the Browns to do good because I also just don't think that their team is that great.
I'm not a huge believer in Cleveland, and if you want to talk to people that don't like Myles Garrett and think he's as good as TJ Watt, well, you're talking to the right people in Pittsburgh.
Now, right. So Myles Garrett is good, and so their defense is.
Aside here though, Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, who are you more scared of on a Sunday going into Cleveland or Baltimore or into Pittsburgh? TJ Watt or Myles Garrett? It's
tough because the Steelers can't win without TJ Watt. So if he's on the field, that's a threat. Myles Garrett, though, can jump over guys to get to the quarterback. So that's very concerning. So it's neck and neck there. But I mean, I'm going to go with the Steelers because, anytime TJ Watt's on the field, the Ravens can't win. So they still can't win even when he's not on the field. That's beside the point. But so I think that the Browns, I mean, they've got David Njoku. I mean, he's a great player, but for some reason they just haven't been able to put it together. Their backup quarterbacks, now that Tyler Huntley's there, I've got a lot of faith in him, but the rest of them, I mean, if Deshaun Watson gets hurt again, it's over. I don't see them going anywhere. They do. I mean, they've got some good running backs. It is what it is. But so I see the Browns, it's going to also take them a while. They still haven't had a full season of Deshaun Watson. So even
and I mean, they were able to capture lightning in a bottle with Joe Flacco last season and make the run to the playoffs and the great defense.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, okay, we're just going on tangents through this, but
no, this is great.
How conflicted were you as a Ravens fan? Because I was fascinated by what Ravens fans would feel about seeing Joe Flacco do that in a Browns uniform.
Joe Flacco's record in the playoffs stands alone. You cannot come close to January Joe. He is another breed of quarterback when January rolls around. So for him to stay, and mind you, this guy's 40. He's got 5 kids. He is really the fact that he stayed in shape and was able to just ball out, come from behind wins, he made it work. The connections that he created in that locker room in such a quick amount of time, I praise that guy so much. And it was crazy because I talked to Justin Tucker before the divisional round when it was a question of would it be Browns versus Ravens at home in Baltimore, which would have been wild. Yeah. So I was kind of hoping for that because we just didn't know how the fans would receive that. And so, Justin and I went back and forth. We were like, it's just crazy to see what he's doing right now, again, in an opposing uniform. So good for him. He went and got the bag. He played great. What a way to end your season and keep your career alive. And now other teams are going to want him because for some reason, the Jets couldn't figure it out with him. I don't know why.
They were happy with Zach Wilson apparently and ready to move on from Flacco.
So, yes, Joe Flacco lives rent-free in my head with how he plays in January, how he plays in the playoffs. He's unreal. So right. So I think the Browns, if they do have a full season with Deshaun Watson, it's going to be progress. And look, this entire division could finish above 500 like they did last year, which is the first time ever in NFL history. So they could still be at 500 or above, but still be in 4th place. That's totally fine. And I would still consider that a win for the Browns if that were true, if that did happen. So for them to be in last, because again, I don't see them making it into the playoffs, especially with how good the Texans are supposed to be. When you look at the rest of the conference, everyone else has beefed up. I can't really say that about the Browns.
Yeah.
I've kept many tabs on them, but I haven't seen any groundbreaking things. So, again, thinking in my head that all teams are going to end at 500 or above, I think the Bengals are going to be second this year. I think they're going to be back in the playoffs. And honestly, they could be first. If I'm being honest, they could be first. And I think Ravens fans would be okay with that because you don't necessarily need to be the division lead to make it to the Super Bowl. You don't have to. It's certainly nice to have home field advantage, but since the Ravens had that last year, I think they'd be fine with going. I mean, it's obviously makes your season a little bit longer, but if the Bengals finished first, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I like the way you set this up because you put the Browns fourth and Cincinnati second.
Yeah.
And there are some hopeful Steelers fans listening right now being like, maybe she's going to put the Steelers first. But you have to put the Ravens as the favorites, right? Should the Ravens be the AFC North favorites? Do you think the Ravens are going to win the division?
There's no doubt that they should be the favorites. Every Ravens fan hopes that they win the division again. And obviously they want to have a better record. I mean, they had a great record last year, but I think that 14-2 season really still lives, in people's mind. They're like, God, we got to get back to a 14-2 season.
Yeah.
What an incredible feat. But that's really hard, especially with, an 18-week season now. And the Ravens' schedule this year is the second toughest in the league. It is incredibly daunting when you look at it. Right out the gate, first of all, based on who they're playing when they're opening the entire season in Kansas City.
Yeah, have fun.
I'm actually happy about that. Again, going back to
that's a good time to catch the Chiefs. We have them on Christmas. That's not fun.
And we saw it last year with the opening with the Lions upsetting the Chiefs, maybe hoping that that's trend. So that would also, I think, just give the Ravens such a boost of confidence starting the season off with a win over the champions. Like, that's what they need, I think, to kickstart the year. And then they go on to play, the Raiders, the Giants, a bunch of other teams that are really promising. Yeah. So I think putting the Ravens at the top of the division, you can't go wrong. But if they did end up second, I wouldn't be surprised because I still think they have that they have the gas to go all the way. And if they finish second, I think it'd be fine. Would they be satisfied? No, but that fuels the fire. Yeah. So I'm gonna throw the Steelers in at third, but I still think they could be above 500. Maybe can you get a wild card in third spot? Maybe. Yeah. It could be possible.
Possibly. I love it. Justin Fields believer, Valerie Preactor. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a ton of fun. And I'll have to bring you on later in the season when the Steelers and Ravens are getting ready to match up in the second half of the year. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Love catching up with you, Josh. This was awesome.